Hi, I'm attorney Amanda Shaffer. Welcome to Notable Approvals. Before I get to our case today, quick few announcements. First of all, don't forget to like us and follow us wherever you watch our lives, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. And if you find this video helpful, please make sure to share it. Or if you know someone who may find it helpful, please make sure to share it as well. So let us get to the case then for today. This is an interesting one too, and this is what I'd call a COVID case, and you'll see why. So the client is a native and citizen of Jamaica. She came to the U.S. in March of 2020 with a B-1 visa, and after she entered the U.S., her then boyfriend, who is a permanent resident, proposed to her. And the plan was, because she has a business back home, she has an apartment back home. She actually was, I believe, a guardian for like her niece back home. Her plan was to return back to Jamaica, start planning the wedding. She was going to come back to New York to get married, but start planning the wedding and, kind of get back to her business and all of that. So what ended up happening, if you're listening to this and you say, I know what happened in March of 2020. March of 2020 was when the entire New York City shut down, and a lot of other places shut down too. And flights were stopped, and I think even Jamaica may have closed their doors. I can't remember anymore if citizens were allowed back or not, but there was a lot of high anxiety then. A lot of people were in that situation where they either couldn't get back to their country or didn't want to leave the country because they were worried about getting back in. So what they did, and this was very smart of them, instead of doing something and then contacting us and saying, oh, we got married, or she was able to leave the country, what should we do now? She came in March, they proposed, and then they realized the situation, and then they contacted us to say what should their next steps be. So the first thing we did, because her spouse is a permanent resident and not a U.S. citizen, we had to make sure that the visa number was current. And what this means is that because when you're a spouse of a permanent resident, you're not considered an immediate relative. And under the immigration law, an immediate relative, which generally speaking is a U.S. citizen spouse, child, or parent over the age of 20, child over the, I always get this, I always say it and confuse it. Spouse of a U.S. citizen, a U.S. citizen child over the age of 21, and then a U.S. citizen parent filing for a minor child. Those are immediate relatives, generally speaking. So if you're not an immediate relative and you fall into one of what's called the preference category, in order to get a green card, even if you enter the U.S. with a non-immigrant visa, a legal visa, even if you do that, you cannot what's called adjust your status to get your green card unless you leave the U.S. or file a waiver, even if it's within the time period you're allowed to be here. So she entered in March 2020. She had 6 months, I think. So that would be June, July, August, September, October, November. Unless I skipped a month, that's November. So she had until November of 2020 to stay in the U.S. And they contacted us, well in advance of that, giving us plenty of time to do what we had to do. So they contacted us and said, look, we want to plan our wedding, but we think that because of everything going on, it might be a good idea to do this, to get married now and just have her just wait until she has her green card before she goes back and wraps up her affairs, or at least until she has her advanced parole travel document, which we were able to file with the green card application. So another thing that occurred shortly before that was there was a rule change with what's called the non-immigrant intent rule. And this has to do with when you are trying to enter the U.S., when you apply for a visa and when you try to enter the U.S. for a non-immigrant visa or a visitor visa. You're telling the U.S. government that you're planning to come to the U.S., stay for a little while, and then go back home. If you end up not doing that, you might you can end up having a problem. They can say that you misrepresented your intentions and now you need a fraud waiver. And it used to be if you had got married within certain actions that occurred within 30 days. There was is it a 30, 60, 90-day rule, and then they switched it. I can't remember what they called the rule. Bottom line is this. It used to be a little bit easier. There was less scrutiny on someone who entered with a B1, B2 visa, and then applied for adjustment of status. Now with immediate relatives, we don't have to worry about this. Well, we have to worry about it a little bit. We have to worry about the non-immigrant intent because they're still subject to that requirement. But if they fall out of status, like they decide to file 6 months after they enter on the B2, they'll still be able to get a green card without a waiver, without leaving the U.S. Spouse of a permanent resident, however, cannot if they fall out of lawful status. So, and they will look at, so that means you have to act fast. You have to get everything filed pretty quickly, but at the same time, it can't appear that your plan all along when entering the country was to just get married and file and remain here permanently. So you have a little tricky things to get around. So we talked about this to all of them, and we, part of our conversation included like, what evidence do you have of non-immigrant intent? And my plan was, which is what we did, was to submit. Now, evidence non-immigrant intent is not on the required list of evidence when you're filing your I-130 and your I-45 application. However, when you know there's a potential problem looming and you can get out in front of it, it's always better to do it that way, because honesty, I always say this, honesty will set you free. Honesty is the best path here. So that's what we did. And what did we do? Well, first we had both the petitioner and the beneficiary write a statement, an affidavit, and sign it, explaining what their plan was and why their plan changed. And obviously, coronavirus is a great excuse. The pandemic is a great excuse, but you still have to explain how it affected you personally. So first they wrote those letters. Then we wanted to show her, almost like we were filing a non-immigrant visa application or evidence package, we wanted to show her ties to Jamaica and to show that her actions before she left and when she got here shows that she really was trying to return home. So in order to do that, we submitted a certificate of registration for the business that she owns. We showed she was still paying her car loan, making her car loan payments every month through April. We showed the rent receipts through April and May as well. And then we also showed, oh, right, I forgot this part. This was important. They called us when her flight first got canceled. So that's what it was. I knew there was a reason she actually couldn't leave, not just that they thought they might not get back into the country or something. Her flight she had a return flight. It was canceled, and there were no more flights being scheduled, and we didn't know at that point when the next flights would be scheduled. So that's what the predicament they were in. And I had her, this is a little unique, but I had her take a picture of her suitcase, because she brought one of those little, well, maybe not that little, but one of those little carry-on suitcase with the little wheels. She used to be a flight attendant, actually, so she knows how to pack. But the fact is, if you're just coming here with a little suitcase and not, bags and bags and bags, chances are you weren't planning to stay that long. I think that's pretty good evidence. And then finally, we submitted an affidavit from her aunt confirming that, or her sister confirming that our client, is the guardian for their daughter. And, the daughter was currently staying, because that's where her school was, the daughter was currently staying with someone else in the family, but just because this was supposed to just be a vacation. So there were very strong ties that we were able to show. And again, the visa number had to be current. And the reason why the visa number had to be current is because you can't file the visa petition and the green card application together if you're not an immediate relative, if the visa number is not current. Now, had the visa number not been current, we could have filed the I-130, but she would have had to either file an extension of her B1 visa to kind of hold out until the number became current, or she would have had to figure out a way to get out of the country. Extensions for B1 in that situation wouldn't have worked. because you're basically asking the U.S. government to let you stay here as a visitor for, a little while longer. And they had, once you get married and file the I-130, then the U.S. government really is unlikely to believe you that at the end of your extension, you're going to leave. So we were lucky with that. And we ended up filing in the middle of the summer, a few months before her status expired, pretty confident that they weren't going to have an issue with the non-immigrant intent. The type of marriage evidence that we used, they had a lot of marriage evidence, despite the fact that she hadn't really lived here. It was actually impressive how much they had. Obviously, the marriage certificate, she had already been added to the lease, so we had the landlord write a letter confirming that. The petitioner put her on his listed her as a beneficiary on his 401k retirement accounts, life insurance accounts, basically every work benefit he had that he could name a beneficiary, he listed her and gave that all to us. We had in their affidavits as well, we not only talked about what their initial plan had been, but we also we had them talk about their relationship, how they met, why, how they were maintaining this long distance relationship, etc. Now, I will also mention that her husband is from Jamaica as well. Then they had visited each other a number of times over the years. So we put in the passport stamps. We had greeting cards they would send each other for birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, things like that. And then, of course, we had thank you cards, not from them, from their friends for attending their weddings and things like that. And then, of course, pictures of them at the wedding, pictures of them together and with family and friends. And like I said, for a couple that really had only lived together for a short period of time, it was a decent amount of evidence. But I really think their affidavits in this case were some of our strongest evidence because of how important they were. And we told them, look, I don't think they're going to give you a hard time. They can if they want to. They can send a request for evidence, but by submitting the non-immigrant intent evidence in advance, we were trying to prevent the request for evidence, thereby delaying the case, and we were successful at doing that. So this case is interesting because, and I should mention also that rule I was talking about with the non-immigrant intent, 30, 60, 90 versus 90 days, it was reversed back when Biden came into office. So whatever that rule was, I think you have a 90-day period now again, where there is a presumption. I don't want to misstate it. I should have looked it up before I did this. I'll put it in the comment section, what the exact rule is now. But it's a little more lenient than it was a year ago. So, as I said, this case was interesting because you don't have too many cases where a spouse of a permanent resident is able to get their green card inside the U.S. And that's generally because if visa numbers aren't current, it's impossible. And so it just doesn't happen that often. However, the visa numbers have been current in that category for a little while now, but it can change every month. That's why you always have to look when you're filing. We actually filed it with a copy of that month's visa bulletin because we had that problem with another client where the visa number was current. We filed it, and then we got a request for evidence to prove that the husband was a U.S. citizen. And because we filed it concurrently, I don't know why they assumed that we gave a copy of the green card, but it's USCIS, that's what happens. So, like I said, we don't normally get to see this with the spouse of a permanent resident getting their green card in the U.S. We had to deal with that tricky change in the rule about non-immigrant intent. And we had to make sure, and even if there wasn't a change in the rule, we had to deal with the non-immigrant intent aspect of it. And then there was one more thing I wanted to point out. Of course, I'm blanking. Overall, though, it was a very good case. Considering all the little intricacies in it, it really didn't take that long. It took about a year. We've been seeing spouses of U.S. citizens right now averaging about 9-10 months if everything is filed correctly. So, and we file it as correctly as we possibly can every time. So most of them have been about 9 months lately. And I have some more approvals to talk about later this week that are exactly spouses of US citizens, which we'll get to. But what's important here that I really want to point out, the last thing I want to say about this case, is that if you're in a situation where you're in the US or outside of the US, and you might have different options to either legalize your status or get your family member status, but you're not sure how to do it or what to do, or maybe your plans change, so you may have known what to do and then now all of a sudden something happens and you don't. Follow the lead of these clients before you do anything, before you get married, before you file an application, before you leave the country. Contact a knowledgeable immigration attorney. Our contact information on Facebook and YouTube is scrolling across the bottom of your screen. In Instagram, if you go to our bio page, I believe you should be able to find all that there as well. Make sure you do that, and make sure that you have a new plan and you know exactly what to do and what your options are. You may not even realize what your options are. And that's what's so important, because when people come to us after the fact, like if they would have came into the US, she would have entered the US, he proposed, and then they're like, oh, we got to get married, ran to get married, and then told us, depending on the situation, we might have said that it could have turned into what is a perceived misrepresentation at the border regarding non-immigrant intent. So it was great that they contacted us early, so we were able to make the plan for them and follow it. Oh yeah, there was one other thing. That was the other thing I wanted to say. This is not that important, but they also applied during the time period where we had to file that extra form, the I-944 Declaration of Self-Sufficiency. So it was even more important that they contacted us sooner, because instead of the package being like this high, it was this high, because so much more was needed. Fortunately, we didn't have to worry about that for the interview, and the interview went great. They were granted right away, so we're really happy about that for them. She will get a 2-year conditional green card, since they have been married for less than 2 years at this point. And within 3 months of that 2-year green card expiring, she will need to apply for the petition to remove conditions on her residency. And then, as I always like to remind everyone, if he naturalizes, and then once her I-751 is approved, she'll have her 3 years as a permanent resident and can apply for citizenship. If he stays a permanent resident, she's going to have to wait the full 5 years in order to apply for her citizenship. So I'm not sure what they plan to do, but I'm sure they will do whatever is best for them, and we're here for them and for you should you need us. So that is all today for notable approvals. I'll be back either later this week or early next week with some more cases. Probably tomorrow I'll have one. If you found this helpful or know somebody who will, please like it, follow us, share us, do all that so you don't miss any more of our lives, and so that other people can have this information. And of course, if you need an attorney, we are here for you. Contact information scrolling across the bottom of your screen. YouTube, go to our bio, link in bio page, or whatever they say in the Insta terms, and you'll find it there. Or you can always send me a private message, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. So thank you all for watching, and have a great day.